What is heaven going to look like? You know, the Apostle John, in the book of Revelation, gives us a description of heaven. And from the description that he shares with us, it certainly looks to me as if it is going to be a very beautiful place, a very strong place, and a very secure place. Turn to Revelation chapter 21. If you will bear with me, as we're going to begin in verse 10 of this chapter, and we're going to read through the end of the chapter in his description of heaven. Revelation 21, beginning in verse 10. Be reading from the King James Version of the Bible. And he carried me away in the Spirit to a great and high mountain. And he showed me that great city, the holy Jerusalem, descending out of the heavens from God, having the glory of God, and her light was like a stone most precious, even like a jasper stone, clear as crystal. And had a wall great and high, and 12 gates, and at the gates 12 angels. Names written thereon, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the children of Israel. On the east 3 gates, on the north 3 gates, on the south 3 gates, and on the west 3 gates. And the wall of the city had 12 foundations, and in them the name of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. And he that talked with me had a golden rod to measure the city, and the gates thereof, and the wall thereof. And the city lieth foursquare, and the length of it is as large as the breadth. And he measured the city with the reed 12,000 furlongs. The length and the breadth and the height of it are equal. And he measured the wall thereof 144 cubits, according to the measure of a man that it is of the angel. And the building of the wall of it was jasper, and the city was pure gold, like unto clear glass. And the foundations of the wall of the city were garnished with all manner of precious stones. The first foundation was jasper, the second sapphire, the third claridonia, the fourth emerald, the fifth sarnix, the sixth sardis, the seventh cryostite, the eighth beryl, the ninth topaz, the 10th cryophis, the 11th jacinth, and the 12th asmuth. And the 12 gates were 12 pearls. Every several gates was 1 pearl, and the street of the city was pure gold, and it was transparent glass. And I saw no temple therein, for the Lord God Almighty and the Lamb are the temple of it. And the city had no need for sun, neither of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof. And the nations of them which are saved shall walk in the light of it. The kings of earth do bring their glory and honor into it. And the gates of it shall not be shut at all by day, and there shall be no night there. And they shall bring the glory and honor of the nations into it. And there shall in no wise enter into anything that defileth, neither whatsoever worketh abomination or maketh a lie, but they that are written in the Lamb's book of life. Now here John gives us a description of that great city, the city Jerusalem of heaven. Now this is truly going to be what it looks like. We don't know. But it certainly presents to us a very beautiful picture when we think of all these things. It presents to us a city that is strong and secure. Just how secure is it? Well, we read there in the 17th verse of the walls. The wall thereof 144 cubits, measure according to the measure of the man that is of the angel. 144 cubits. Now, a cubit is from the tip of your elbow to the tip of your finger. 144 cubits would be 216 feet. That's how thick the wall is in his description. And it's going to be a large place. Think about our largest city. Well, it doesn't even compare to the size of heaven. Heaven, as John describes it in verse 16, lieth foursquare. And so the length and the breadth and the height are all the same size. In verse 16, they measured the city, and it was 12,000 furlongs. 12,000 furlongs long, 12,000 furlongs wide, 12,000 furlongs high. Now you may wonder, what does that measure out to? Well, 12,000 furlongs measure out to 1,500 miles. The length, 1,500 miles. The width, 1,500 miles. The height, 1,500 miles. It is truly going to be a great city of beauty, a great city of security, a great city of strength. We all have pictured in our mind's eye what we think heaven is going to look like. Artists have been trying for centuries to draw what heaven might look like. We all have an idea. Even someone as young as a teenager has an idea of what heaven looks like. Brian Moore, 17 years old, had only a very short time. He had an assignment that was given to him in school. And he had just a short time. Like many teenagers, they waited until the last minute to do their homework. And so he had only a short time to write his essay. The title of the essay was to be, "What Was Heaven Like?" And so he sat down and he wrote very quickly his essay. He would later tell his father, "It's the best thing I have ever wrote." And it was the last thing that he wrote. Brian Moore, age of 17, died the day after Memorial Day. He was driving home from a friend's house. His car went off the side of the road and hit a utility pole. Now, he wasn't harmed in the crash. In fact, he stepped out of that vehicle without a scratch on him. But he accidentally stepped onto an electric line and was immediately electrocuted. And so his life came to an end. His parents found the essay that he had wrote. And they were so impressed with that essay that they hung it in frames on the portrait wall of their house. They couldn't help but believe that, that they were meant to find it and to make something out of it. I want to read that essay to you. The title of the essay is "The Room." In that place between wakefulness and dreams, I found myself in the room. There was no distinguishing features set for one wall, and it was covered with small index card files, like the ones that you would find in the library, that would have the titles and the names of the authors written on them. But these files, they stretched from the floor to the ceiling and were seamlessly endless in either direction. And they all had different headings on the front of that drawer. As I drew near the wall of the files, the first to catch my attention was a file drawer that read, "Girls I Have Liked." I opened it, and I began flipping through the cards. And I quickly shut it, and I was shocked to realize that I recognized every name written on each one. And then I realized, without being told, I knew exactly where I was. This lifeless room with its small files was a crude catalog system of my entire life. There were written the actions of my every moment, big and small, in detail that my memory couldn't match. A sense of wonder and curiosity coupled with, a sense of horror stirred within me as I began randomly opening the files and reading the cards that were therein. Some of them brought joy and sweet memories. Others, a sense of shame and regret. So intense that I would look over my shoulder to see if anyone was watching. A file named Friends was right next to one that was marked Friends that I betrayed. The titles range from outright mundane to outright weird. Titles like books I have read, lies I have told, comfort I have given, jokes that I laughed at. Some were almost hilarious in their exactness, things that I yelled at my brothers. Others I couldn't laugh at, things I had done in my anger, things I had muttered under my breath at my parents. I never ceased to be surprised by the contents. Often there were more cards than I expected. Sometimes there were fewer than what I hoped. I was overwhelmed by the sheer volume of the life that I had lived, and I asked myself the question, could it be possible that I had the time in my few years to fill each of these thousands or even millions of cards? But each card confirmed the truth of my life. Each one was written in my handwriting, each signed with my signature. When I pulled out the file marked TV shows that I have watched, I realized that as I pulled the drawer further and further out, that it just continued to grow with its contents. The cards were packed tightly, and yet after 2 or 3 yards, I hadn't found the end of the file, and so I shut it, shamed. Not so much about the quality of the shows, but by the vast time that I had spent, the vast time I knew that the file represented. When I came to a file marked Lustful Thoughts, I felt a chill run through my body. I pulled the card out only an inch, not willing to test its size, and drew out a card, and I shuddered at the detailed content. I felt sick to think that such a moment had been recorded. Almost animal rage broke on me. One thought dominated my mind. No one must ever see. No one must ever know about the things that I have done or the things that are in this room. No one must ever see it. I have to destroy them. In an insane fury, I yanked the file out. The size didn't matter now. I had to empty it and burn the cards. But as I took at one end and began to pound it on the floor, I couldn't dislodge even one card. I became desperate, and so I pulled out a card only to find that it was strong as steel, and I couldn't even begin to tear it. Defeated and utterly helpless, I returned the file to its slot. Leaning on my forehead against the wall, I let out a long, self-pitying sigh. And then I saw it. a drawer that bore the title, People I Have Shared the Gospel With. The handle was brighter than those around it. It seemed almost newer, almost unused. I pulled on its handle, and just a very small box of 3 inches long fell into my hands. There wasn't any cards there. And then the tears came. And I began to weep. Sobs so deep that they hurt. They started in my stomach and shook through me. I fell on my knees and I cried. I cried out of shame from the overwhelming shame of it all. The rows of file shelves swirled in my tear-filled eyes. No one must ever know. No one must ever see this room. No one must ever know what I have done in my life. I've got to lock up this room. I've got to hide the key. But as I pushed away the tears, I then saw him. No, please not him. Oh, anyone but Jesus. I watched helplessly as he began to open the files and to read the cards. I couldn't bear to watch his response. In the moments that I could look at him, look at his face, I saw a sorrow deeper than my own. He seemed to go directly to the worst boxes of all. Why did he have to read every one? Finally, he turned and looked at me from across the room. He looked at me with pity in his eyes. But this was a pity that didn't anger me. I dropped my head. I covered my face with my hands. And I began to cry once again. He walked over and put his arms around me. He could have said so many things, but he didn't say a word. He just cried with me. Then he got up and he walked back to the wall of files. He started at one end of the room and he took out a file, and one by one he began to sign his name over mine. No, I said, rushing toward him. All I can find to say was, no, no. I pulled the card from him. His name shouldn't be on these cards. But there it was, written in red, so rich, so dark, so alive. The name of Jesus covered mine. It was written with his blood. He gently took the card back and he smiled a sad smile and he began to sign the cards. I don't think I'll ever understand how he did so quickly. But in the next instant, I seemed to hear him close the last file and walk back to me. He put his arms around me and he said, "It is finished." I stood up and he led me out of the room. There was no lock on the door, for there were more cards to be written about my life. Wow. What an essay. I don't know what kind of grade he received, but what an essay. So much truth in this particular essay. Great truth about our life. For every one of our lives is being recorded somehow. Every thought, every word, every action that we think that we do in this life is being recorded. And friends, one day, it's all going to be revealed. Everything. All of it is going to be revealed. What was it that Paul said in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 and verse 10? The apostle writes here, "For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that we may be judged according to the things that we have done in this life, whether it be good or whether it be bad." Every thought, every word, every action, everything we do, good or bad, will be recorded. Even those times that we thought nobody knew what I said, or nobody knew what I was thinking, or nobody knew what I was doing, God knew. And it was being recorded. In Ecclesiastes, the 12th chapter, in verses 13 and 14, Solomon writes this. Ecclesiastes 12, 13 and 14, Solomon writes, "Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every work in the judgment." Everything that we have ever done, every thought, every word, every action, he will bring everything into judgment. And notice the next part of the verse. "For God shall bring every work in the judgment with every secret thing." That thing that we thought nobody knew about, that nobody saw, that nobody heard, but yet God did. He will bring those secret things into the judgment. Can't help but wonder, how are we going to feel when come the judgment all of these things are going to be revealed about us? How are we going to feel? Well, there's one thing we need to understand, and that is the blood of Christ cleansed each of us at one point. And the blood of Christ will continue to cleanse us. In Ephesians chapter 1, and verse 7, "In whom we have redemption." Okay, we have redemption in who? Well, whom refers back to Jesus Christ in verse 3. "In whom we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins, according to the riches of his grace." In whom we have redemption. You know what that word redemption means? It means a releasing. Wow. That blood can release us from all of those things that we have said and done and thought. The blood can do that. Friends, we want to encourage you. We have anyone here tonight who needs to come in obedience. Let these very words, let these very thoughts of this essay weigh heavy upon you. If you're part of the body but you have erred in your faith, let these things weigh heavily upon you. Because one day, everything is going to be revealed. But Jesus is the answer. Won't you come? While together we stand and we sing, what number? 9.